Okay, in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to address a few things. First, let's take a look at what needs to be done. It says using various weights and colors of Myriad Pro Bold, along with the images provided, recreate the attached full color quarter page ad 4¼ by 5½ with an 1/8 of an inch bleed on all four sides. With an 1/8 of an inch bleed on all four sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look and see what was submitted, and we're also going to talk about bleeds. And even though I did not call for it here, we're going to talk about margins, and we're going to talk about the importance of both of those in this video. First, we're going to talk about margins. Now, I know I didn't mention that in the instructions, but let's take a look and see. Let's take a look at margins. I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. This line here is your margins. We call it a margin. It's also known as a safety or a gutter. This is your trim, where it's going to be cut. And of course, this is your bleed. All right, now, typically, the default setting for both the bleed and the margin or the safety is about the same, an 1/8 of an inch. An 1/8 of an inch here for your bleed, an 1/8 of an inch here for your margin. Let's consider the benefit of the margin. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in your ad at the trim size. Now, the wonderful thing about when we place an image, the wonderful thing about InDesign is it gives us options. So I'm going to go to your image, your PDF file, right there, Shannon. Very good. I'm going to say, so you can see this. I'll say open. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want to bring it in at the trim size, all right, which is where it's going to trim, which is that black line. So I'll say OK. Then I'll put it right here. And as you can see, it comes in at the trim size. Now what I'm going to do is, let me just view this thing, display performance at high quality so you can see everything. Now I'm going to zoom in down here, all right? And now you take a look at these logos, all right? And you can see that they are outside of the margin or the safety or the gutter. And let's talk about what that is when we say we need to encapsulate our live content within the margins. Okay, what is live content? All right, so here's the deal. I'm going to use this analogy. Let's say, for example, we're talking about a car, and we talk about the body of a car. Now, the body of a car, it's designed in such a way where it is aesthetically pleasing to the eye. But the main function of the body of that car is primarily to protect the live content, which would be you. In other words, if anything were to happen externally, if you were to be hit by another car or if you hit something, that exterior of the vehicle is designed as, even though it looks good, it's designed to protect the live content, being you on the inside. So if we look at this, if we can translate that into the wonderful world of print production, and again, I'm going to zoom in so you can see this, all right? If anything were to happen, this is our trim right here, all right? And if anything were to happen, if this thing was trimmed incorrectly, you don't want to lose your live content. And your live content are those things which you don't really want to compromise. Things like logos, things like text. You don't want to put that outside of the margin or the safety because it may be compromised if the job is not printed correctly. So that is why whenever you start to design, when you start to lay out, you should always have a value of at least an 1/8 of an inch on the inside. That will be your margin to protect the live content and all of your live content. And when I say live content, I'm talking about things like logos. This logo looks fine. All right, the text is good. But right here, these should be on the inside. So that is something that you should consider. Next up, let's talk about bleeds. Okay, first I'm going to delete this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place your PDF file again. And this time I'm going to place it with the bleed setting. So I'm going to come over to your document. There it is, Shannon EX9. Move this over. I'll say open. And as you can see, what I'm going to do right now is, instead of saying crop to trim, I'm going to say crop to bleed. And I'll say OK. Now, before I actually place this, I wanted to show you something. That this red line right here represents the bleed. And the bleed is 1/8 of an inch. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this here. I'm going to drop it in because it is at the bleed size that you have established. And I said to myself, this is way off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to center this on the page. So I'll center it left to right, center it top to bottom, and see what the problem might be. And I can see what it is immediately. If you notice, when I have this thing centered, I'm looking here at the X and the Y, and it's set at 0.8 inches. So my thinking is, and I'm almost positive, when you put in the bleed, you typed in 0.8 as opposed to 1/8 of an inch. 0.8 of an inch is closer to 1 inch. 1/8 of an inch, watch this, is, when I type in, and let's say for example, if you notice, 1/8 of an inch is 0.125 IN. 0.125. That is 1/8 of an inch. If you weren't sure, you could put in 1/8, and if you're in inches, which I am, you'll see that it automatically changes to 0.125. Let's say, for example, I'm going to cancel out of this. Let's say if I were in, I'm going to change the value from inches, because that's what it is right now, inches. I'm going to change it back to picas. So then I'll come back to the bleeds, and you'll see that the numbers have changed because 1/8 of an inch is actually 9 points. Well, let's just say you're not sure, you're really shaky with this whole math thing, and I can understand that. You could type in 1/8 IN and watch what happens. It changes to P9, which is 1/8 of an inch. So what's happening is when you put in your bleed value, you put in, and I'm going to go back, I'm going to show you, I'm going to bring it back to inches. I'm going to type on your dot, I'm going to type on what you created. You put in 0.8 inches. So let's say, for example, if I were to change, which I'm going to do that right now, if I were to change the bleed to 0.8, which is what you have, watch what happens. Now you can see that the margin is exactly what you have, which unfortunately is wrong. So let's talk about, and again, this is not a matter of trying to call you out. I want to make sure you understand what's going on. So you had the right intentions to put in the bleeds, but you put in the wrong specifications. Lastly, let's see how we can solve this problem. Okay, first of all, I'm going to zoom in on your, this is your submission. And as I can see, here is the trim. There is a slight bleed, but not enough. This right here is the trim. And this right here, this little slither right here, this is your bleed. Now I notice that there's a stroke around there that shouldn't even be there. That doesn't need to be there. But we need to extend this out to the 1/8 of an inch measure. So right now what I'm going to do is I am going to show you, I'm going to change the 0.8 to 0.125, which is 1/8 of an inch, and you'll see this is where the purple background should be. It should be right here. All right, and you don't need to have this black stroke. Now, let me show you what that looks like. Let me show you, here is the actual ad itself. And if you notice, I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. All right, This represents, there is the bleed right here, and you can see the imagery goes out to the bleed. This is the trim. And as you can see, I've taken a more aggressive approach toward the margin. All right, the margin right here, which encapsulates all of the live material. All right, I made it a little more than 1/8 of an inch. I believe I made it 1/4 of an inch. As a matter of fact, I can tell you exactly what it is. Let me change this to inches. All right, and then I'm going to take a look at my margins. And yes, you can see I have 1/4 of an inch. Again, I've taken a more aggressive approach. I don't like live content to be close to the edge. So you can see everything is encapsulated. All of the live content is encapsulated within that 1/4 of an inch margin right here. And the background treatment is going out to the bleed, which is 1/8 of an inch out. So getting back to yours, you can see once you change, and I would like you to resubmit it. If you feel so inclined, you will put in, you can go up to, what you could do if you want to make the change, if you decide to do this, you go to File, you drop down to Document Setup, and you're going to change it to, if you're in inches, 0.125. If you're not sure, you can just type in 1/8, and it'll automatically change to 1/8 of an inch. So again, InDesign is going to work with you. All right, you put those values in, you'll see this will pop up. Then you will extend your background to the bleed, and I would even challenge you to take all of your live content and make sure it's encapsulated within your margin. And I would also change this from, this should not be blue, it should be white, or paper, as it were. All right, and I can also see what you did, which was a mistake, is you converted this thing to, and again, I know this is something, this is where the comfort zone comes in. This, you can see it's rasterized. All right, so this looks like it's a Photoshop image. Maybe what you did was you incorporated that into the background. I'm not exactly sure, but it is a Photoshop image. And I think probably, I'm going to zoom in here, and these two are Photoshop images. Again, what you're doing is you're going back into an area that you're comfortable with, and really you're making more work for yourself than you should. For example, if I come in, if you take a look at, I'm going to zoom in on these items here, look at how sharp and clean. Okay, I'm going to come out, I'm going to zoom in over here, look at how sharp and clean. Okay, all you have to do is, if you took what was given to you and you just put it right in InDesign, what you did more work for yourself than you needed to. You would bring in your art images. All of your art images could come in separately. You could bring in these separately. You could bring in these separately. You can see I have these are separate. These are separate. All right. The text is set separately. All right. You could have just brought them in separately. All right. There's no need to incorporate that. There's no need to open it up in Photoshop and compose it in Photoshop, because let's say, for example, right now, if I wanted to move these items around right here in InDesign, I'm not able to, because this all is, I almost can tell this is all one image. All right, so you're limiting. What you've done is you've defeated the purpose of building this thing in InDesign. You can have multiple file formats in an InDesign doc. You can have a JPEG, you can have an EPS file, you can have an AI file. All right, but right now, when you go back to your comfort zone, then now this is what you have, and it's not going to work. So try it again, and let's see what happens. Because as you can see, as I zoom in one more time, I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but as I zoom in, see how this is all rasterized? All right, and this is nice and sharp. This is rasterized. This is supposed to, these figures are supposed to be rasterized because they are Photoshop images. But these are Illustrator images, and there is no need for them to be transferred into Photoshop, because again, it compromises. Look how nice and sharp that is. So try it again, and let's see what happens. Hopefully that helps.